I think the previous two questions that you guys have been working on is a really good example of how a knowledge of the history of the discipline has affected my teaching. So for instance, the reasons that we don't teach literature in the classroom, the reasons that we don't focus on grammar in the classroom in a way that is hyper-intensive. These are things that people did in the past that didn't work and were shown not to work. So the idea that I shouldn't be doing these things has kind of been ingrained in my mind based on the things that people have done before that haven't worked. But we can always think of history as a narrative, a story about our discipline, and I think that's an important thing to understand. Where are we going and where are we coming from? Understanding, that trajectory is really important as well, I think. So for instance, I always focus on, in terms of the history of composition, I always focus on kind of like the modern history. Obviously there's a longer history of teaching composition that stretches back to the foundation almost of universities in this country, and in a European tradition as well. But I think for me, I focus on when did we start doing what we normally do in the composition classroom, which I guess you could say is around the 1960s, although some people might have different dates for that. And that's when we started to study composition. That's when we started to study college writers as writers, I guess you could say, instead of people who were making mistakes, things that we were trying to fix. So at that stage, we started to come to an understanding of what college writers should be doing in order to be successful writers. So it's a paradigm shift, I guess you could say, from thinking about it in terms of a pattern of error to thinking about writing in terms of a process, I guess you could say, and looking at the students themselves as writers. And keeping that idea in mind, that the students themselves are writers. They're here to compose. They're struggling with that for sure, but they're still here to compose in the classroom, has really helped me come to an understanding of how I should be working with students. I try to work with them more on an individual basis based on the problems and issues that I see them running into as writers, instead of as a group of people who are committing errors that need to be fixed.